knows what Britney Spears wants, and it is the freedom and the liberty that should be offered to every single American. Britney has been abused by the media, she's been abused by a grifter father, and she has been abused by the American justice system. And so we need to come together and to create a federal cause of action, a federal change in the law that will free Britney and the millions of Americans who are impacted by a corrupt guardianship system.
All right, that was Congressman Matt Gaetz of Florida yesterday, speaking out in support of pop star Britney Spears and her fight for freedom from what she calls an abusive 13-year conservatorship. Congressman Gaetz joins us now. Congressman, always good to see you.
Oh, thanks for having me, Sean. You know, I'm here in Southern California because the unstoppable Marjorie Taylor Greene and I are having one of our America First rallies in Riverside on Saturday, and I hope folks will go to AmericaFirstRallyTour.com to sign up. And yes, I went by the courthouse where Britney Spears did obtain a modicum of a victory in legal relief. For the first time now, Britney Spears has a lawyer to actually represent her own interests since 2008. So thousands of days have passed since Britney has had a true legal advocate to express her interests. And I think this really ought to open our eyes into the broader abuse that exists in the conservatorship and guardianship system, and we could take action with legislation to help many of our fellow Americans.
Okay, so you mentioned you're out there in California. You represent Florida. Britney Spears is not a resident of Florida. She's not a resident of your district. Why is this issue of conservatorships and guardianships important to Matt Gaetz and the people of Florida?
We have many retirees in Florida, and what we've noticed is that guardianship and conservatorship abuse tends to concentrate in places like Florida, Arizona, California, where folks have earned a substantial amount of money, go somewhere to retire, and then oftentimes, sadly, a grifter family member will swoop in and take control of financial assets. But in Britney's case, it's not just about money. It's about basic decisions she can make about even voting or getting a driver's license or taking out her IUD so that she could have another child or even get married. And so my hope is that the sensitivity that the country has shown to Britney's case can actually help my constituents in Florida, because it can spring the Congress into what should be bipartisan action. But I've got to say, it's a little disappointing, Sean, that there is no intensity in the effort from Democrats. Like, where is the sisterhood of the traveling pantsuit for Britney? Where are the woke women of the Democratic majority standing up for this woman who's being abused by an unfair system in our legal process?
You know, it's interesting, and I assumed that I knew the answer to that question. I think I was right, because it's weird, though, that you've got an issue that probably, and I'm just guessing on this, largely affects older Americans, as you put it, people in Florida and Arizona who have their rights taken away, and yet is a young person, a successful young person who has become the sort of the cause celeb for this issue.
You're totally right. And sometimes in America, we just care a little bit more when terrible things happen to famous people. We probably shouldn't. We should care equally if any of our fellow citizens are being abused. But if there's any silver lining in this extreme case dealing with Britney Spears, I think it awakens us to the broader problems that so many other people face. One of my partners in this legislative endeavor is Congressman Burgess Owens of Utah, and he played in the NFL. And he would even suggest that there are people who accumulated wealth in athletics who then have that taken away from them through the guardianship and conservatorship process. Burgess Owens actually tackled OJ, which I thought of yesterday as I was standing in front of the very courthouse that freed OJ and has not yet freed Britney Spears, of all things. And I think it certainly points to the need for a change in federal law.
So it's interesting. I was watching that clip of you at the beginning, standing in front of the courthouse, making the case there. And you talked about a federal response, right? When I think of Matt Gaetz, normally it's a champion of conservative causes, right? So square this circle for me. Matt Gaetz, champion of conservative causes. Conservatives generally are a states' rights kind of people. And yet what I heard from you in that clip is that we need a federal response to this.
I believe the federal government always has an interest in vindicating the liberty of our citizens when there are federal rights at play. Think about it this way, Sean. If a state imprisons someone You have a federal cause of action under a habeas corpus review to determine whether or not your person has been properly deprived of liberty through that imprisonment or that constrainment. But there is no similar cause of action for someone in a conservatorship. And so I think that for us to be legally consistent across the board, there ought to be some way to open the federal courthouse door to obtain relief. And I think that in these conservatorship cases, a little bit of federal action might actually have the antiseptic effect of having the states clean up their act where they haven't been acting in the interests of their citizens.
You know, we're obviously talking about Britney Spears, a pop star. You brought up Burgess Owens, an NFL star. You represent probably a fairly large, disproportionate number of older people. So if you're someone in middle America, do you think they'd be surprised to know how many people this actually affects?
I do. I also think that there are a number of people throughout the country who simply are mystified by this process. And if they had a greater basket of rights to be able to access, there wouldn't be the type of abuse that often is happening at the hands of lawyers, accountants, highly sophisticated entities that know how to drain resources. And so I think that this issue is actually far more of an undercurrent in American society than we probably talk about. It does affect people everywhere, but you're right, where there are concentrations of retirees, and particularly retirees with assets, you see greater frequencies of guardianship abuse. I dealt with this as a member of the Florida legislature. I'm ready to deal with it on the House Judiciary Committee. I only wish that Nancy Pelosi and Jerry Nadler would allow us to make it a priority. Right now, they've said they don't really care, and there are other issues that matter to them a great deal more.
Congressman, I just want to ask you to look in your crystal ball for one second. With all the attention that's coming onto this, where do you think this case goes with respect to Britney Spears?
I actually think that Britney Spears is going to obtain the relief that she needs as a consequence of her new lawyer. We'll be watching the case carefully, and we'll be assessing the extent to which this opens the door to other important legal questions about people's rights, about their opportunity for control over their assets and audits. And I think that Britney ultimately prevails. It should have happened a long time ago.
Congressman Matt Gaetz, thank you for shining a light on this important issue. I appreciate you joining us as always.
All right. Thank you, Sean.